Hello there, short friends. Today I'm going to do the AMA video that I posted on the YouTube community tab some time ago. I said I'd do an AMA as a 10,000 subscribers celebratory thing, and also because I don't have any other videos recorded at the moment. So forgive the simple setup and the schwanz pointed at my face here. I am going to read the questions that you have answered in this more casual setup, and hopefully it's of interest to you. If it's not, then this is not the video for you. It will be me rambling, answering questions, and that's all I have planned here. So anyway, without further ado, I will answer the questions asked. Sword friend Jesse, do you prefer bohi or no bohi, and why? Well, long and the short of it is I prefer both there. I have to say that I like them maybe for different reasons, but also the same reason. They're still swords and awesome. Bohi can be very aesthetically pretty. They can come in a pretty wide variety of things, and they make a cool, or at least aid potentially the cool swishy noise that they can make that helps me know if my edge alignment is good. And as a training tool, I prefer to use a sword with a bohi if I'm doing iaido or something where I'm trying to do well at edge alignment. In terms of swords without bohi, there's less stuff to get caught in a cut, though I haven't necessarily experienced bohi being very detrimental to cutting practice. I still like the way they look. I still like the way they feel. I still like swords without bohi. So I do like both. I realize that's a non-answer, but initially I would say I like swords without, but I've gradually come to appreciate swords that do, and which one I like, I suppose, is going to change on the today. And today happens to be a day where I like both. Hope that answers your question. Sword friend Ronaldo, ever thought of doing reviews on Huawei katanas? Huawei katanas, I don't know how to say that, so I'm going to say Huawei because that's how the manufacturer of the stuff that the government isn't allowing is going through. So I think that's how you pronounce it. Forgive me if I'm wrong. I would be interested in your thoughts on their swords. Well, I would honestly be interested in my thoughts on their swords as well. I would love to review a Huawei katana because if there was one manufacturer that has eluded my ability to review on this channel that I would like to show, it's probably them. They make some really awesome stuff that I've certainly followed on their eBay page as well as on their website. I think they nip and tuck some areas that just other people miss. The Usurime looks good. In terms of the sword assembly, some of it looks really similar to other forges, but there's just some tidiness about their work that I find very alluring, and I'd like to see it in person and evaluate it. I've requested a review sample, and I haven't had any luck there so far. And somebody also was going to send me their Huawei katana to look over and review, and unfortunately life got in the way. So I haven't had a chance to do it, and the swords that I own from them were secondhand and only speculatively from Huawei. So I thought really highly of the swords that I had from them at the time, but it's been 8 years since I owned any swords or held any from that company. So yes, I would totally like to do it. Unfortunately, I don't think it's in the cards, at least anytime soon. I don't plan on buying one. Personally, I'm pretty well satiated in the swords I use for iaido and cutting and things like that. And while I'll certainly keep an eye out, for me to buy one, it would probably take a pretty stellar deal on the secondhand market, and they usually get scooped up before I can, when they're at a price I can justify buying one to make a video about. As for review samples, well, since this is a 10,000 subscriber celebratory thing, maybe one day I will rise to the YouTube echelons that justify sending me a review sample to play with. But in the meantime, my thoughts are I think they make some very, very compelling offerings. A lot of people seem to be very pleased with them. Some not so much on the custom ordering, but if you're buying from off-the-shelf stuff, I haven't heard a lot of negative press about them. And from the photos that they're posting about some of the smaller things, it looks like very compelling offerings, and I wish I could play with one. Hopefully that answers your question. Sword friend, enter the fartrix. That's like Matrix, but with farts. For building a katana using production-made parts, do you recommend using one or two makoogie? Some traditional builds using. So what's your take? For using, I would recommend using one, but I would recommend using something secure with the makoogie. Two can be a security measure in case one of the makoogie break. If you're using chopsticks or crappy materials, that can happen, though it doesn't happen particularly often. If you were to use like a brass makoogie that's tapered properly, I think you could get the benefit of security while simultaneously not having two makoogie that play off one another. The downside that I've found with two, or that I've heard more than experienced, is that if you have two, it's difficult to get them to play well with one another. Ideally, in a custom sword, and most of the custom projects that I've had have all had one makoogie, and that is that the ska is shaped in such a way that as you put the blade in and put the makoogie in, the makoogie is pulling the nakago further in the ska and really tightening things together. swords with 2 makoogie, it can be difficult to get them to play in that way, at least so I've heard. Most of the ska that are made on mass production swords aren't built in such a way that it does that thing. But if you're building it yourself, maybe you can have the best of both worlds. So I would say 1, but with good materials and not with a makoogie made of chopsticks. Sword friend Vladimir Putin. Hey Matthew Jensen, I want to buy a katana in a budget of $300 to $400. I'm curious, are the swords from Swords of Northshire? How good are the swords from Swords of Northshire? Are the cheap ones there of good quality? Well, the one I reviewed some time ago, the base level of that sword would be under $300, and it was the augments and extensions and customizations that made the one I had more than the budget that you're asking about. So I would say if that sword is any indicator of the level of quality they put out on their conventional swords, then yeah, and hopefully the video is going to give you some idea of how good or bad they are. I made one and all my gripes are in there, but generally speaking, I would say they make good products. I don't know that they make them, they contract out, and whoever they're contracting with is making good products, and they're within the budget that you have. So hopefully, yeah, I would say they make good stuff. Sword friend David, in your videos you occasionally do Iaido. I'm guessing to get a better feel of the swords you're testing. You would have guessed correctly. Would it be possible to convince you to spend a few minutes talking briefly about your Iaido techniques and when you do them in the future? So short answer is I can talk a little bit more about them, but it would depend on in what context. And if there's something specific you want to know about a technique, throw it in the commentary and I will try to elaborate or maybe explain it in the future. But I don't want to do educational material in the realm of martial arts. I'll talk about swords and give my thoughts on them and let you know where I stand, but as a martial artist, I am not competent enough to teach you, and I'm not authorized to do so either, which is kind of the twofold reason that I would probably say no. If you're looking for an explanation on how to do the Iaido I do, then you would need to go to the schools that I do, where those teachers are authorized to do it. It would be very easy for me to teach you incorrectly without a more senior instructor there to kind of help me mind my P's and Q's. And perpetuate false information and bad information, and I'm not qualified to teach Iaido. And if there was a specific move about why you do it or what I garner from it, then I could maybe elaborate on that. But in general, like explaining the movements or why they're done, or in a more teaching capacity, I wouldn't want to do that, and it would be a recipe for trouble for me. I'm not authorized, as I noted, to teach any of those things. One school I go to even forbids me from showing it in video, so you don't see some of the Iaido that I do. The other is okay with me doing them in video and doing them in a public setting, but not teaching them. I can't teach with any level of authority, and not only is that an organizational thing that I'm not allowed to do, but one I agree with. I don't think I'm skilled enough to impart that knowledge in a good solid way. But there are others that do. Learn the Sword or Lethal Sword. Dana Abbott has a YouTube channel, and well, finding tidbits of information can be a little challenging. He studies a similar style of martial arts, or maybe he's even doing Toyama Ryo. I can't remember, but I've garnered little tidbits of information about Iaido from his channel, and for without going into it too much, I think there's a way to garner a lot of information about Iaido from the way he explains things and stuff like that. So I hope maybe that would be a good spot to go for that kind of stuff. Anyway, it's similar to what I do, and I think he does a better job of explaining it than I would. Swordfriend Brotherman, could you do a top 10 list of the worst, most disappointing katana purchases? On one of your videos, you discussed the purchase of a Paul Chen praying mantis and how disappointing it was. I feel that kind of dynamic would be helpful for subscribers of your channel. It would be tough for me to do that tactfully, and I don't mean in a way that like I'm afraid of bashing a vendor or saying things that are not nice. But in general, most of the sword companies that I've had have made swords in a way that do sword-like things quite well, and I would find it very difficult to go the negative route. I'm really honestly quite loath in doing any top 10 lists. I didn't want to do the top 10 or the top 3 video that I did, but with enough requests, I kind of acquiesced, I suppose I would say, and did the video. But it's tough for me to do those types of videos because much of what makes a sword good or bad is very subjective and dependent on the user and their skill level. And I'm the first to admit that I'm not a great user, and my level of knowledge could always be better. So doing a negative one, though, it'd be very easy for me to just turn it into a bash session, which isn't what I want to do, and I don't think would be furthermore very helpful. The praying mantis that you're mentioning is actually a great example of that. I didn't like it, and it did help motivate me to make a YouTube channel where I blabbed about it. But that doesn't mean that everyone wouldn't like that sword. And so hopefully the video that I'm making, showing, kind of build quality and giving my thoughts on it, which are, less subjective anyway than just how much you like a thing. But the data that I provide on balance and all of that kind of stuff gives you at least maybe a better idea of how it's going to feel in your hands than nothing, or the information that's available on the manufacturer's website. So hopefully the information does it, and I can tell you in a specific instance if I'm disappointed about it. But my disappointment is more on me than a lot of cases on the sword vendor, and that's a great example of one. Just because it was heavy or didn't feel the way I wanted it to in my hands doesn't make it a bad sword. It just didn't meet the expectations that I had set for it. And is that Hanwei's fault? I don't think so. I think that's more on me. So anyway, if there was, maybe there's a way to do what you're asking. I haven't discovered the right way to do it in a way that is meaningful and helpful. If you can maybe give me some ideas. It's not a definite no, but I would want to be cognizant of actually having it be helpful versus just fuck those guys, they make shitty things, because in general I don't think that about most companies. Do I think it about any company? Maybe, but generally nothing comes to mind as that case. So anyway, there we go. Sword Friend Alex, that's not a question, Sword Friend Alex, but thank you for participating. Sword Friend Slick Smoke, what do you think about the durability of T10 steel, and have you tested much with it? Also, what's your personal favorite top 3 steels for katana? Thank you. Durability of T10 steel, I've had a few swords that were advertised as T10. I say advertised because I have no way of substantiating it, and it seemed like a fine steel, but nothing that wowed me in comparison to 1060 or 1095. Yeah, it seemed like a fine steel, though. I can't say anything remarkable or negative about it. So there's that. And what my favorite top 3 steels are for katana, I will just put a caveat here that I think that the type of steel gets way more attention than it should in the market. If you're in the bucket of, I have a couple, even $5,000-$10,000 to spend on a sword, then finding a steel that you like and a smith that's has some competency in unleashing all of that potential in the steel, I think is certainly worth a conversation. But very often people that are watching my channel are talking about budget level swords, and if you're talking about that, then I wouldn't buy an exotic schmancy pantsy steel, even though I really like them and think they're awesome. I wouldn't buy one and at least have a lot of expectation for it out of a mass production factory in China. Not that somebody in China can't temper L6 correctly, it's just that even from a reputable company like Conway, I've played with some of their L6 steels, which have the potential to be awesome if they're in the hands of somebody like Howard Clark that's kind of got the temperament of that steel down and how to deal with it. But Hanwei doesn't seem to be able to do that particularly well. That said, steels like 1060 and 1095 seem to be pretty prolific in the sword market in China, and the smiths there seem to really know how to kind of maximize the output of what that steel is capable of. And I think you generally get more out of those than you do the more exotic steels there. And again, I'm not trying to throw shade at smiths in China. They work very hard, and I'm sure a number of people are more than capable of doing amazing things. My experience with exotic steels out of forges in China has not been particularly good, though, and I think a lot of it's because I'm playing with relatively inexpensive, steels that are known to be temperamental in their heat treatment. So anyway, I think that's why all things being equal, the steel makes a big difference, but nothing is equal. So you're not playing in that field, and it's just not the case. So you're just because like S7 or D2 or L6 or CPM 3V or something like that may be better on paper, and certainly arguably it is. 1060 is something that you can get a very solid, very durable product out of, with reliability out of a forge that is within a lot of people's budgets. So hopefully, I don't know if that's the question you're even asking, but hopefully I've answered it. Sword Friend Hohan, hopefully I'm saying your name right. Grays on 10K. Grays, is it gray? Maybe I've just lost the hair. But I bet you mean grats, and so thank you very much, sir. Love your videos, especially the drunken reviews. Yes, I've stopped doing them because people told me to stop. It's pretty mixed reactions on the drunken reviews. I don't know. Should I make more of them? Maybe with enough enough requests, I can reprise my role as drunken Matt and tip a few beers back and ramble into the camera some more. Swordsman Victor, can you do more reviews on sub $500 katana worth buying? I do plan to review more katana. Sub $500 swords aren't generally something that I seek out, not because I'm too elite to use them, but because I have the swords that I like and I use them, and I'm not really on the hunt for myself personally, so that means I try less stuff. And mostly what you're going to see in the $500 range is probably going to be review samples from companies that are willing to send them, as well as things that I can, buy at a price that justifies buying it to make a YouTube video out of it, because I'm not looking for anything myself personally. Anyway, yes, I will make more, just not sure exactly when. Swordsman Rick, congrats on 10K subscribers. Thank you. What got you into Japanese martial arts? Do you practice EI or practice Kendo along with EI? Would you recommend having a suka made? Thoughts? Not sure where I should go, if I should go with the original company in South Korea or have a commission in the U.S. So thank you for the congrats. What got me into Japanese martial arts? Really, martial arts was probably to kick butt as a young kid, but specifically Japanese martial arts was mostly a love of the Japanese sword. I was infatuated with the object before I was the martial arts, and I would say what got me into it was the sword. Maybe I don't know about maybe, but a lot of things compounded into that, but a way to better understand an object that I'm infatuated with, to demonstrate some level of competency with it, and to expand my knowledge around it and its uses and its history. But I would say the object itself was a leading factor for me. So I'm sure a lot of people get interested in the martial arts and then find themselves loving the sword, but I loved the sword and then got into martial arts. And what would I recommend for your ska? Personally, it's easier for me to go with people in the U.S. just because customs and shipping. I'd rather have the money not go to a shipping company and go to the person doing the work. And I've been very happy with smiths and, artisans in the U.S. that produce those things. The Mystery Man in Black is the guy that I usually go to, but there are certainly others out there that do a great job. Without knowing the costs or your objectives, it's tough for me to answer that. But generally speaking, you can see kind of my heart is on my sleeve here. Most of the projects that I post are done with Tsukumaki and ska done in the U.S. Swordfriend Chuck, do you ever plan on doing videos about Nihonto antiques? Specifically, where do you buy antique fittings, blades and fittings? What to watch out for in terms of scams, and how antiques compare to modern blades and fittings. I have some plans to talk about the subject in a very loose fashion, but much like my aforementioned martial arts practice, it's very easy for me to perpetuate false information here, and I have a lot less to offer in the way of knowledge, at least in comparison to people that already talk about the subject. So where to buy antique blades and fittings. Nihonto US, there's a local guy around here that actually runs that. That's Andy, and he sells a lot of cool stuff. Rice Cracker, AOIR Japan. You can get them from eBay as well, but I suppose that leads into point 2, which is how to watch out for scams. The best way is look at a lot of swords, feel a lot of swords, read a lot of books, and you'll garner the knowledge necessary to hopefully identify them. But forgeries run the gambit in terms of like a sword that's advertised as a Japanese-made sword that's actually a cheap piece of reproduction. Looking at enough swords and seeing enough genuine antiques will hopefully give you a pretty clear idea of that. It's pretty easy for me to spot just some pattern welded, inexpensive kind of novelty sword advertised as a Japanese, Nihonto authentic samurai sword. I can usually spot those. But if you were to say, hey, does this look like an antique sword? It isn't as easy for me to spot antique forgeries or swords where the mei or the signature on the blade doesn't match who actually made the blade. Those forges can be very old. You can have a very nice, well-made sword with a signature that doesn't match who made it. And that is something that I routinely get caught on as I play the game of, is this sword legit or not? As for how antiques compare to modern blades and fittings, if there was something in particular around that question you were interested in, I would be happy to pontificate about it. But in general, I think they are very separate categories of things, and very few people are buying antiques and cutting them and using them in abusive ways or using them as self-defense weapons. They're more of a historical art or object to appreciate. People might cut with them, might do Iaido, but probably not as often as people that buy modern blades. And modern blades, you're a little nervous. Is it going to turn into a helicopter of death? How durable is it if I want to cut things with it? So I think they just have different audiences. If there was a particular facet of how they compare with one another, let me know what that is. But in general, I don't plan on buying an antique and whacking it into logs. I don't think that's what you're asking, in fairness, but how they compare. I just need to know more about how you would like them to be compared before I could do that in a way that's actually helpful. Sword from Peter. Any dream swords that you're looking to get? Not really. I need to part with some of my dream swords before I buy more dream swords. I'm always looking to get any sword that is not currently in this room. I want it to be in this room, but I know that that's not really a possibility. And as I look at the swords that I have, I've got a lot of swords that I've been very blessed to own and have, and I can't say that I'm really on the hunt for anything in particular. There are swords that I would certainly like to play with. I mentioned the Huawei one earlier, but generally speaking, no, I'm not on the hunt for anything specific. Sword from Peter, another question. If you had to give up every sword you have, but got to keep 2 katana and 2 euro swords, which would you keep? Well, that would depend on the circumstances. If we're talking zombie apocalypse, then I'm gonna, skip anything fancy and go with simply made pieces as kind of tactical even as possible, things that aren't going to rust, that are going to hold up in unexperienced hands. I'd probably still grab my Hanwei bamboo mat and maybe one of the angel swords or something like that, because they're pretty durable blades, and I don't think I have any like favoring durability type stuff. But I'd skip the folded things. Maybe a 1075 Rick Barrett blade as well. Those are pretty well built, pretty durable, and pretty long lasting, and pretty thick and beefy to cut through clothes and helmets and survive, I suppose. As for Euro, I would I don't know the Euro something. Let's see, I'd probably grab the biggest one. The Crom Killer back there is like a spear. That might be helpful just to keep range. And maybe the St. Catherine from John LaDemo, just because it feels so nice in the hand. I feel very accurate with the sword. But it would all depend on what you're asking. If you're talking fire, I'd grab the most expensive ones because I'd need to sell them to rebuild shelter. So it just depends on your circumstances. I think either way, I'm probably grabbing my Hanwei bamboo mat that's been customized. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Sword friend Istar, what got you into Japanese swordsmanship? As a current student of EI myself, it always makes me curious why other people get into it. Well, I kind of explained already. It was the object primarily that got me into Japanese swordsmanship. What got me into martial arts in general maybe is a different question, but specifically Japanese swordsmanship was a fascination with the Japanese sword. Sword friend Tater, what is the toughest katana you've ever handled that isn't cold steel? Springiness, edge retention, won't break or take a set if it finds itself in a 2x4. Depends on price. Angel swords have been very durable. Just about anything like the Hanwei Raptor series has been very durable. The Ronin Dojo Pro series has been very durable, and I've whacked them into 2x4s and logs and things like that, and they've held up really well. The most difficult one is the ones that, at least that I can speak to, are the ones that I've tried to break that were sent to me for the purposes of breaking them and doing reviews. And the hardest one for me to break that I can recall in recent memory has been the Ronin Dojo Pro. There was one in particular, and I don't remember exactly which model number it was, but one of those 1060 blades that they sent me was a real pain in the ass to break. And maybe my current recipe for breaking swords would yield different results, but I do require sweating quite a bit to break that sword and kind of having to cheat in order to do it. So that in the ballpark, the Dojo Pro. Sword friend Michael, what has been your favorite koshirai of all the swords that you've owned, and is that katana still in your collection? Also, what swords have you bought firsthand and paid full price for? That is a short list. So, favorite koshirai, I mean, it's going to be something Mitsudome related. I'm really a fan of the Black Beauty sword, the Howard Clark 1086 project that was done recently. Roman Urban did a killer job on those fittings. I had a set of an antique Suba with Shibuichi fittings that was on a Josiah Boomershine katana. Antique Mitsudome Suba, I really like that one. I don't know that, like Koshirai set. If I had to ball it up into like whole sets, yes, I think the Black Beauty one is probably my favorite to date that I've had in terms of whole sets. If we are able to part them out and say favorite Fujikashira Suba and not necessarily the whole package, I think my favorite Suba so far was another one by Roman Urban. He did a Tsukashi style Suba, like a cutout iron Suba, and it was just full of kamas and mitsudomes, and I thought it was just so cool and unique as well. It walked a good line between like contemporary and kind of antique work, and to me, I thought it was awesome, and so I put that on a sword that I sold some time ago, but I would say that was one of the coolest Suba that I've ever seen, and certainly one that I had done. So that would probably be my pick of the Suba. Go figure that it's just littered with swirly mitsudomes all over the place. And also, what swords have I bought and paid full price for? Well, there's the Hanwei Praying Mantis. I think I got it on sale, but I still bought it effectively new. I bought a Ronin Elite. I think I've only maybe bought 5 swords at like full retail price. So not many, and I don't know that I can even remember what they are. One was like an off-brand SW swords or something like that. I got that online before I started making reviews. That was something that I used for practice, and was one of the early ones. From my earlier days is like, well, 5 isn't the right answer. Like, since I've been more interested, I've probably bought that many, but my early collection was always bought new. I didn't buy any secondhand swords, and they were like mall katanas and stuff. So, or cheaper aluminum swords and stuff like that. And I can't think of any particular names of the brands, but the ones that stand out are the Praying Mantis, as well as the Ronin Dojo Elite. It was one that I paid full price for as well. Other than that, the Praying Mantis was one of the first big expenditures that I made, and somebody mentioned it earlier in the video. After that, I really was inclined to buy secondhand because they don't have moving parts. If somebody's cut and it's still in one piece, it's probably doesn't have any really critical fatal flaws, or at least it's less likely. And it seemed like a very obvious way to save. Pretty quickly, when I was disappointed, I started looking into it more, and the marketplaces seem pretty widely available, and I was very fortunate to have good experiences in my initial purchases, so it kind of kept me going. But very few is the answer to that one. Sword from Joseph. If you were to recommend a custom katana in the $200 to $600 range, what do you think the best all-around service quality, steel fittings, performance? I ask because many people want their own style custom swords and want quality and performance intact. I think the best value for the dollar that I've seen so far is probably Jayco Sino swords. In terms of what you get, the experience of buying them, I think there's a little bit of lost in translation, maybe a language barrier there. But in general, I think you get a lot for your money with that. I remember the Sanmai, crazy weird blade that I had them configure was under $300, and a similar crazy weird configuration from Swords of Northshire, albeit different, but with less features on it, arguably was more expensive. So I think build quality wise, they do a great job. Any sword company can be hit or miss. Anything can be out there, and that's kind of to be expected. But I like the service from Jayco, and I thought what they were asking for the sword that they sent me was very, very well within reason. So I don't, in terms of 600, I think that's probably ballpark where I think you get the most value for your money. If you could define a sword for a specific task, that might be easier. And when I say that, like if you're cutting tatami mats, then, and your budget is $600, my recommendation is probably going to be different than Jayco. They don't necessarily have as much in the way of big, wide tatami mat cutters. And so I would probably favor something from the Hanwei, like Musashi XL, if you can find one of those in that ballpark. I think that would be better for that activity. Likewise for Iaido, I haven't tested a lot of Iaito from mass production sword companies. But assuming the build quality is very similar, I think you'd probably be better from Tazando or something like that. If you're exclusively doing Iaido, you don't want to cut yourself, you don't want maintenance, and you want something that draws and cheats quietly and is fit better in that way. I think that would be better. So it can be very task-based, but if you're asking me, best all-around experience with the mass customization companies out there and who gives you the most for the money, if you're willing to deal with some of the back and forth and the delay and the service side of things, I think Jayco makes a very compelling product. Swordman Robert, I've wondered before how many hours you get of sleep each night, and do you have to schedule in your sword fun to make time for it to happen? It's a good question. How many hours of sleep? Between 4 and 8. Sleep has not been great for me in this COVID time. Admittedly, it's struggled. I read a lot at night to kind of wind down, and it's given me a chance to get midway into the Stormlight Archive series. So in terms of scheduling in swords, I don't have to schedule all of it. In some events and things like that, I totally do. So if it's a seminar or a class, then I have to schedule time for it and plan for it. If it's a video where I'm, breaking a sword, generally speaking, I don't have to schedule it unless other people are involved, in which case there's some scheduling and deadlines and trying to cooperate with other people. But if it's just cleaning a sword, measuring a sword, or doing, Iaido in my backyard, no, I don't schedule it. I do it as I have time. It could be, generally speaking, mornings have fallen off. I don't ever do it in the morning, in honesty. But mid-afternoon or evening, if I need to clear my head for work or get a little bit of movement in, then I'll do that, and that's all unscheduled. But generally speaking, there is not a day that goes by that I don't play with a sword in some respect, whether it's measuring or looking or researching or playing with or something. So yeah, it depends. Swordman Joey, do you have any unique firearms like antique custom designs like you do with swords? I do not. Well, maybe I do. I have some firearms certainly, but for the most part, the firearms that I own are practical tools, and I don't have the same level of interest in firearms as I do in swords. I do own some firearms. I've taken some in trade for swords and things like that, but generally speaking, I don't talk about them. I actually used to have a couple videos about firearms, but I didn't think they really added any value, and I took them down. Generally speaking, though, the firearms I have are well, not all of them, but the majority are pistols that I would carry, and the only time I really use them is to maintain some level of proficiency with the firearms that I choose to carry. As for the rifles and things like that I might own, I very rarely use them because I'm just not willing to clean them, and ammo is so expensive. So it takes kind of a special occasion for me to really do much with them. And every time that I've brought them out, it seems like I can maintain some level of proficiency. Rifles are pretty easy to use, a little bit more point and click, or at least I seem to be more accurate with them, which I bet is a story for everyone. So, but I don't use them very much because it just takes a lot to clean them. But yes, I don't know if I have anything that you would find particularly interesting. Sort of Joey, another question. You have done a lot of destructive testings on all kinds of katanas made in various ways. How do you think antique katana would hold up to some of the swords you've tested? Short answer is I don't think they would. I don't know. The antique katana run the gambit of quality levels just like any thing, I suppose. So you have very poorly made antique katanas and you have very well made antique katanas. And if I took the best example of some of the antiques, then they would probably hold up quite well. But the average example, I would say, is probably going to be softer than most of the modern swords that I test and probably not hold up as well. And that makes sense given how they were made and the materials that were used. If you take the kind of mid-level Chinese mass production sword at like $300 to $500, and you take a mid-level Japanese sword of the average, I would venture a guess that the modern steels are probably going to perform better, despite the amount of effort that went into the modern one versus the antique one. So yeah, I don't think they would be very comparable. I bet the modern stuff would do better. Then again, I haven't tested it. I don't know that I've ever really put an antique sword through the paces, and I don't know if you would consider a gunto an antique sword. It's getting there, but if you're talking about like folded steel, made 17th century sword, I'd venture a guess they wouldn't hold up as well. At least the average level ones. The good high quality ones might. Sword from Dean. What is the meanest comment someone has sent you that hurt your feelings, and the meanest comment that made you laugh? Well, generally speaking, the mean comments do give me a laugh. I can laugh at myself, and I have a pretty thick skin, which is a useful tool on YouTube. But I would be lying if I said that mean comments don't, or I don't care, or that they don't hurt my feelings. Sometimes they do, and it sucks, and I want people to enjoy the content, but I certainly don't demand it or expect that everyone will. Yeah, I can't. The good news is I can't think of one specifically that stands out as the meanest. I think where I probably take it the most personally is people will comment on how long-winded I am, and it's something I recognize myself, and I'm trying to deal with, or trying to do better at, or trying to be more succinct, or not go in circular conversations. But that's tough when you're alone rambling into a camera. So some of those, I suppose, hit me the hardest, and they're not always intended to be mean, just kind of calling me out on the thing that is actually happening. Some of them are mean, and they're like, die from cancer of the ass, and that's not particularly funny or mean. I can't say that anything has been so mean that it's caused me to rethink my decisions, or want to fundamentally change things. And for the most part, people are very positive, though, one mean comment can really sour things. I think the main point that I would say from your question here is that I can't actually think of one specifically. I can only think of the scenarios that have kind of educated me, and one certainly is people harping on how long-winded I am. But others, when I've engaged in a comment that I try to assume has positive intent, and I'm not reading correctly, I'll sometimes go into a conversation with somebody that just is basically more articulate in the language of being mean than I am, and I don't have the mental capacity to keep up. And it's very easy for people to dunk on me in conversations, because I'm not I don't have the internet capacity to argue in a way that's funny. But people have I remember on Metatron's channel, actually, I think I was arguing about naginata usage in or something like that, and somebody was totally owning me in a conversation, and it was very witty and very funny, but I couldn't keep up. So that's the other thing, is I find it's not terribly helpful to banter back and forth with some of the mean conversations, because I'm not good enough to keep up with it. I'm not at the same skill level. Anyway, yeah, still I'm being long-winded again. The point is that for the most part, I can't think of any specific instance that it has hurt my feelings. I couldn't pick out the comment specifically, and there's been a number of them that have made me laugh. So at least people are being funny about it. Sword friend Isan, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Congrats on 10K. Thank you very much. Do you know anyone that makes a quality wall hanger? Those with stainless steel. All I've seen have been subpar fitting. Should I go custom? But I don't know anyone that will accept stainless steel requests. Cost doesn't matter. I just want to have a quality katana without really carrying it. So, I'm going to assume that when you say stainless steel, that you're okay with not having a sword that's really appropriate for you. Stainless steel can be very brittle in longer length blades, and so you don't generally see it used on functional swords. So if you're okay with a wall hanger, then I'm going to assume that you're okay with a steel that isn't stainless steel, that maybe fills the need of what you're going for. And for that, I would say there's a lot of good Japanese manufacturers that make Iaito, or Iaito. Iaito is the art, Iaito is the thing. So you can get an Iaito sword that is basically going to fulfill that. It's not made from a steel that rusts, and so it doesn't require maintenance, and you can hang it up there. But you can get some that are made with a lot of care. Tizando Custom Shop does some pretty cool work. I have an Iaito that is older from them that I've used for a number of years and has held up really well, and also has like a cool ribbed saya and some cool rattan wrapping. And I don't know how elaborate they get on the fittings, but that would be my recommendation, is to seek out kind of an Iaito from a reputable manufacturer that can do some custom work. Tizando would be the direction that I would point you to go. They're not mall katana. They're not meant to be used. You're not going to hurt anyone with it. They're not functional, but they certainly look like a katana, and they're also very functional for martial arts practice. They do a good job there, and they can still be very, very pretty. Hopefully that answers your question. Sword friend Shane. Hello, Matt. Hello, Shane. I like these AMA questionnaires. I'm glad you do, sir. That you set up from time to time. My question is, has an aspect of your training in martial arts or swordplay ever carried over into your personal life? And was there a positive outcome? For example, was there a critical moment in your life where you needed calm, focus, discipline, and your martial arts training helped you achieve that? If so, would you be willing to share with us an instance where something in your life challenged you and where your training helped you through it? That's a really good question. Again, I can't think of a specific instance where shit hit the fan and I got Wusa Daniel-san. I can't say that there's a particular instance that I can identify where I'm like, thank goodness for martial arts, other than maybe falling off a ladder and like having some ability to know how to fall. And that's not necessarily calm. That's just having some of the body mechanics so you don't die from a short fall. I would certainly say though that it has to be long-winded a little bit here. Martial arts for me has like in different points in my life. I am a middle-aged man now, and it has changed. I've studied martial arts for a long time, and that's not to say I'm good at it or that I've achieved anything particularly of note that you would find interesting or laud me in your mind as a competent martial artist. But I have been at it for a while, and when I was a kid, it was to learn to kick butt, and my people were happy to put me in it because maybe discipline would be a byproduct. But if it was, it was a byproduct, not my intention, not what compelled me to do it. In my kind of teen years, it would be, exercise and a way to interact and be social, and also probably the kick butt side of things. Though you start to, when you get punched in the face enough throughout the years, you start to really garner that it hurts and that you don't like it. And that it is a thing to be avoided, and I very quickly learned I'm not particularly good at avoiding them. So there's that, and then kind of later adult life, exercise and socialness became more important and less about kick butt, but more about like it being a tool in my toolbox. Once you have actual people around you that you care about losing, having I could work out and do something different, but doing martial arts, having a tool that could potentially help my family survive a bad situation was also something. But I would say that more realistically, it was like the workout and social aspect that kept me going. And now I'm not as active in some of the more vigorous martial arts, but doing swordsman, it's more to like clear my head and zone out and take my mind off work. I'm at an age where if I sneeze too hard, I throw my back out for a month. I'm not a competent warrior. You don't want me to have your back in a fight because my arthritis will kick in or something. And so it's not the kick butt side of things. I've realized any kick butting days I had are well in my past, and it's really to almost meditative, almost to take my mind off of things. And so throughout the years, that I think in each of those instances, the martial arts has fulfilled that need, and it's certainly done something for me personally throughout the years in whatever capacity it was supposed to fill. But I can't think of necessarily an exact instance where it helped. But it's probably more of a peanut butter spread, subtle influence in every interaction in my life, rather than like being a focal point in a very tense situation. I'm kind of a homebody. I don't do anything in particular where I can, I've been very fortunate to avoid trouble. So I can't think of anything particular that I could share that would be that would fulfill the spirit of your question. But hopefully the ramblings and musings have at least elaborated on it enough. I would certainly say it's a value. I would certainly say it has influenced me and that it shows up in my attitude or character, but not in a like Wusa Daniel-san, time to fight, stay calm, stay on target, kind of situation. I'd have to think about it more, though. I want to say there's a good answer to that, but I don't feel like I've given it. Anyway, hopefully it's good enough. Sword friend YouTube Punk. Okay. Do you have any new favorite entry-level katanas? Have any brands or companies surprised you recently? Well, I've certainly been exposed to brands depending on where you want to call recently. I mean, I didn't know about Jayco or Sino swords before somebody mentioned them, and I was impressed with them. Ronin katana, there's mixed reactions depending on who you talk to, but I've been impressed with them. So it depends on where you want to think about the recent side of things. I think what surprised me recently is just the amount of companies out there that are capable of delivering you a sword that does sword-like things, even in maybe not the finest capacity for like under $200. And it seems like it's a lot more approachable to get something functional than it has been in the past. And China's gotten quite a bit better at making swords over the years. They miss a little bit on the mounting side of things, but the blades seem to be quite a bit better made and balanced and things like that. So I can't say that I've got a particular brand that has wowed me, but I'm more wowed with just the trend of things, that the mass production customization options that are out there, that there's some analogies that you could make to like the mass production computer companies, where you pick the parts you want and they assemble them in a way that seems bespoke to you. That's an option, and it's an option for the price that it is. I find pretty cool, and that the price points are more affordable than they have been. But not one specific company, I would say. I think, yeah. Hopefully that answers your question. I can't think of a specific company that has wowed me with something new. Maybe with the exception, it's not entry level. It's Motohara, I suppose, is probably the new one that surprised me, but that's not entry level. But I would say that in terms of surprise, I was surprised with the level of quality that they were putting out. Anyway, hopefully that answers your question. I think I didn't, but we're towards the end here. I don't know how much more I can pay attention. Sword friend JLH365, JHL365, dyslexia is kicking in there. You are transported back in time to feudal Japan. Which of your swords from your personal collection, past or present, would you want to have with you? You can only take one. I think that the important thing to note here is that I would probably be looking for something that wouldn't stand out the most. So like if you're asking sword, like you could go a few different directions with this. Do you pick something with a modern steel that's superior and will have the potential to break through other swords, or at least supplement my terrible technique or something like that? Is that the direction I go? But obviously it's going to stand out. Obviously maybe it'll break space and time, and people will not have some idea about how this metal ended up where it is, and it'll be some mystery in the future. Or do I go for something that doesn't stand out, like like do I go with a Howard Clark blade made of L6 that's tougher and more resilient than the blades of antiquity, or do I go with not of antiquity but a feudal Japan, or do I go with the Anthony de Cristofano blade that I have, or maybe even one of the antiques that I own that would fit right in, so to speak. If I try to go with the subtle route, for example, I know I'm elaborating on this more than I should, but if I were to go with like an antique and actually bring an antique back, and I'm like, hey, I'm not standing out, I think there are other features of me beyond the sword that I carry that would stand out. Like, I think that's probably obvious. So I'm pretty sure I would be destined for death pretty quickly, regardless of what I did. So, if I'm going to die anyway, let's not break time with me. I'll maybe bring an antique that nobody would bat an eyelash at. I don't know if that's the reasoning for your question. Which one would I take with me? What I always keep going back to the context thing is the idea that I'm going to be thrust right into a battle in the middle of feudal Japan, and nobody's going to attack me because I'm a pasty white guy. That's maybe is what's the context here? Anyway, hopefully that's enough. Surfing Cody, hell yeah, congrats on 10K subscribers. Thank you, Cody. I've never seen a katana in person. My question is, do katanas have a secondary bevel, or are they more like am I reading that right? Knives with only primary bevels. Love the channel. Well, generally speaking, no, they don't have secondary bevels. Ideally, they have kind of one bevel. that rides all the way out to the end. The bevel can be shaped. Sometimes it's flat. Sometimes it has more of an apple seed kind of shape. But generally, there's only one bevel, and you don't have a pronounced or present secondary bevel. That said, I'm sure there are katanas in history that did have secondary bevels. Maybe they were battlefield sharpened and got one. I'm sure there has been an instance where a sword in Japan that was made by Japanese people and happened a couple hundred years ago had a bevel that was a secondary bevel. I guess I can't think of an example that comes to mind. I just think it's likely to happen. But generally speaking, a katana, a well-made one, would not. So there we go. All right, so that is it. That's all the questions I got for the AMA. I will pull the AMA post down so that people can't continue questions. It seems like folks like these AMA things, so I will probably do one in a few months or something like that, and try that out. Anyway, that's all I got. I hope the video has been interesting. As always, cheers and thanks for watching, and especially thanks for subscribing. 10,000 of you have subscribed. That's a lot of people. I'm surprised. I'm surprised that has happened. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for the interest. Thank you for the comments and questions. And I will try to continue making videos to entertain and educate along the subject of swords and such. All right. Anyway, cheers and thanks for watching.